So I was 16 when one of my closest friends in the world came up to me and he said, Ushma, I don't feel like I fit into my own body. One way to figure out your sexual identity is to speak to a trusted adult about what you're going through, because it's not very straight and narrow. It's not कि I'm attracted to a certain sex, then I'm a lesbian, because these terms are so loosely defined.
Did you know why June is celebrated as a Pride Month? And did you know that LGBTQIA stands for something? If not, today we have a beautiful therapist with us who is great at her work and is here to dissect the entire terminology for you. Please welcome Ushma Ashar with me, who is going to talk about Pride Month, why, what and how do we recognize this entire community.
Hi everyone, I'm Ushma Ashar. I'm a therapist. Today I'm here at Radio City, India to talk about Pride Month.
June marks the Pride Month. We are here to understand and make our audience much more aware about what Pride Month is and what the community stands about. So to begin with, why don't you help us, break down the terminology of LGBTQIA, what the community stands for?
Of course. So LGBTQIA is an all-inclusive community that includes people of all different sexualities and gender orientations who may not necessarily subscribe to the societal norms. They may not be cisgender or heterosexual. So the first two terms, L and G, refer to lesbian and gay, which refers to people who are attracted to other people of the same sex.
Okay.
B stands for bisexuality, which refers to people who are not exclusively attracted to just one sex, but they may be attracted to more than one sexes.
Got it.
T refers to transgender. Transgender refers to someone who was born biologically a certain sex, but they do not identify with their own sex, and they identify with the opposite gender.
Sure.
That's transgender. Q is more of an umbrella term that encompasses of anybody who may not necessarily identify as cisgender or heterosexual. I is probably the most misunderstood term in the LGBTQIA community. I stands for intersex, which is someone who does not have the biological characteristics of just one sex. So for example, they may have reproductive systems of both male and female. They may have chromosome patterns that may not subscribe to just one sex.
Oh.
That's intersex. And A refers to asexual, which is someone who experiences a lack of sexual attraction to other people.
Be it any gender.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be any gender, but they just don't experience that sort of... They may still experience romantic attraction, but they don't experience sexual attraction.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you so much for breaking this down. So as a therapist, do you often interact with people who are from the community? And am I using the word community correctly, or is there something else do we call it?
No, community is fine, and yes, I do interact with a lot of people, and especially now that people are getting more and more aware about what the community stands for. A lot more people are coming up to mental health professionals to get help, whether they're confused about their sexual identity or their gender orientation, or they've already accepted who they are, but they come from families where they are not given that sort of acceptance.
Sure.
So I interact with a lot of people. I also work with people who are undergoing gender affirmative surgery. So that means someone who's undergoing transition either from male to female or female to male. I help them in a holistic manner, so that includes their test administrations to ensure that they are taking the right decision.
Correct.
That also includes getting them a psychiatrist to ensure that they are in the correct state of mind to make that decision, and a psychologist to cater to all of their mental health needs.
So I'm going to ask you a very commonly asked question that we got a lot while we asked people that, okay, we're going to have a therapist with us. So is there anything that you would like to ask the therapist about the Pride Month as a whole? One of the questions that was repeated was, why is the Pride Month celebrated?
That's actually such a great question, and while I was also very curious about this when I was completing my masters, and so I went into this deep hole trying to understand why Pride Month was celebrated just in June. And there's actually a really fun story behind it. So story time. Back in 1969, people from the community used to face a lot of discrimination, so not just socially but also legally. So some places in the USA, it was illegal to serve someone if they were perceived to be from the community. So people from the community, if they looked a little bit different from the rest of the population, they were not given drinks, they were not served food. In fact, a lot of places, cops would raid the cafes where they just assumed that there was someone who was from the community.
So bizarre.
It's insane. And one of those places was Stonewall Inn, which is in New York.
Okay.
And people from all over the community used to hang out there because that's one place where they felt like they could be themselves and they
Sure.
felt safe, right? And sometimes police would come in and snatch away people and arrest them for absolutely no reason. And one such day was 28th June in 1969.
Okay.
And yeah, the cops barged in and they started arresting people. But for the first time, instead of fleeing, people actually started gathering, and 600 people stood there in protest for over 6 nights.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened on June 28th, 1969, which is why to this day across the globe people celebrate Pride Month in June to commemorate the fighters who stood up for their basic civil rights back in the 1960s, which is why Pride Month is still celebrated to this day. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, especially in our country also, the Pride Month is not so much about celebrating who they are, but more so a fight to get their basic human rights like marriage. So that's really unfortunate, but yeah, that's basically why Pride Month is celebrated.
Wow, this is such an interesting piece, and I'm sure our viewers must have actually got a lot out of it.
I hope so.
So thank you so much for breaking it down. So when you say, when you're consulting, or people are coming to you for therapy or sessions, and when they use the term, I'm having a difficult time to come out, to my friends, family, or my loved ones.
Yeah.
What does that term actually mean?
Okay, so coming out basically means to self-disclose one's sexual identity or orientation. The process is different for everybody. For some people it could mean revealing their identity to maybe a close friend. For some people it could mean revealing their identity to a family member that they love. But for some people it could simply mean accepting who they are and finally coming out of the closet and saying, you know what, this is who I am and I accept myself as I am.
Correct.
Yeah.
So why is the entire thing, be it somebody from the community and when they come out, is considered a taboo even in the 21st century today?
So one of the main reasons that the LGBT community in general is considered such a taboo is because we as a society, a majority of the society consider it very unnatural.
Okay.
Even though time and again nature has proven that homosexuality exists across species, right? 1/5 of all swan couples are gay. Did you know that? That's a fun fact.
What?
Yeah, 1/5 of all swan couples are gay. So homosexuality exists across all species, but we consider it something unnatural because we haven't really opened our mind up to different kinds of love that exist, right? Also, we have a very rigid idea of what a family looks like. To us, it's a man, a woman, and kids. That's a family. So unless we as a society come together and say, you know what, no, that's not just one type of family, that's not just one type of love, it is always going to be considered a taboo.
Correct.
Additionally, religious beliefs come into play a lot. So if someone believes the word of scripture and they think that homosexuality is a sin, they're probably not going to change their mind unless they have an experience with someone who's also from the community and they are maybe able to empathize with them.
Correct. So I'm going to circle back to what you said, that people have difficult times in opening up or probably accepting their sexuality and everything. So do you also have parents coming up with you for sessions about consulting that maybe their child is going, I wouldn't say transitioning, but has come out to them, or maybe is not behaving the way they expected a man to behave or a girl to behave like this. So do you also have interactions with families and parents as such?
Yes, I mean more often than not it is parents who come up to me with issues like this because to them it's such a big deal that their child is not straight, that they cannot give them a biological child, things like that become such a big issue. So one of the biggest challenges that I face as a mental health professional is still being empathetic towards someone who does not have the same ideology as me when it comes to the community, when it comes to people of different gender orientations, sexual orientations, right? And sometimes that's families, and it is really heartbreaking because that's your parents are supposed to be the first people who you can go to, who need to support you, and when you don't get that sort of support from them, it is really devastating. So I do get a lot of families who come up to me and as a professional, it's my job to simply listen to what they are going through instead of try to change their mind.
Sure.
That's not my job, of course. So I'm gonna try my best to sit there and be as neutral as possible. My responsibility is to ensure that the child has a safe space to be at. It's not to change someone's mind or to give them this revolutionized idea of what love is supposed to look like.
Correct.
So yeah, I definitely get a lot of families, and it's very important for me to still somehow be neutral when I don't subscribe to their idea of love.
Understandable. All right. So let's come down to the more fundamental part of it. That how does one get to know about their own sexuality?
So I wish there was like a simple roadmap that I could give you to navigate through sexuality. But again, sexuality exists on a spectrum. So you cannot put people into boxes, right? So you may be heterosexual, but there's maybe one woman that you're attracted to. But does that make you bisexual? It's such a spectrum, and it depends entirely on you to decide what term you want to use for yourself. It's absolutely nobody else's job to tell you what sexuality you are. But something that really helps is talking to a trusted adult or a mental health professional, because a lot of people, when they are confused, especially when they are minors and they're confused, they take steps that maybe impact the rest of their lives. Like some of them maybe start using substances, or sometimes they may have suicidal ideation. So one way to figure out your sexual identity is to speak to a trusted adult about what you're going through, because it's not very straight and narrow. It's not I'm attracted to a certain sex, then I'm a lesbian, because these terms are so loosely defined.
Correct.
And they mean different things to different people. So unfortunately no roadmap, but yes, of course, feel free to speak to a professional or a trusted adult. And
so it's very subjective that way.
It is very subjective. So I could sit here and tell you that a woman loving a woman is a lesbian, but again, it's on such a spectrum that it could mean different things to different people. Right? So you get to decide what term you want to use for yourself. Even if you don't want to put a label on yourself, that's totally okay. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Great. All right. So again, I'm going to ask you, this conversation is going to revolve a lot around mental health, right? That's why we're sitting here.
Yes.
So what do you do when somebody opens up to you? Like, maybe I'm asking this into two, let's divide this question into two parts.
Okay.
How do you react, when they tell you, and what do you say when they open up to you?
Okay. So I was 16 when one of my closest friends in the world came up to me and he said, Ushma, I don't feel like I fit into my own body. And then just a year later, another one of my best friends came up to me and said, I think I'm bisexual. And at that point, I remember being very clueless, and I didn't really have a reaction, not because I didn't accept them for who they were, but because I was very scared of saying something that might offend them, or that might make them feel like I don't still love them, or they're still not my best friends, right? So one thing that I've learned over the years is to not tell them that you already knew. Like if someone's coming up to you and saying that, hey, you know what, I think I might be gay, don't say, oh, मुझे तो already पता था, तू तो ऐसे चलता है ना, you must be gay. मुझे पता था पहले से. Don't say that, because it trivializes their experiences to such an extent that they feel like their moment was like taken away from them. It's such a monumental thing for a lot of people to come out. It takes a lot of courage. It does take a lot of courage, right? So instead of telling someone that you already knew, try telling them that you're very thankful that they felt they trusted you enough to open up to you about it.
Sure.
Tell them that you still love them. Tell them that they are still the same person and that nothing changes. These words of affirmation, they may sound very cliched, but they mean the world to someone who's going through something like that. Your second question was, how do you respond to someone when they're opening up
what
to you?
What do you say to them when they open up to you?
Okay, so don't say anything that's going to trivialize their experience, like, oh, it's just a phase. Don't say, अरे तूने तो अभी तक experience नहीं किया है, तुझे क्या पता? People know, right? Like how you wouldn't question someone if they tell you that they're straight. You wouldn't sit there and say, oh, but you've never tried with another person of the same sex. How can you say you're straight? So don't trivialize someone's experiences. Another thing to keep in mind is to not out them to other people. So very simply putting, let's say I have a friend who comes up to me and says, hey, you know what, my pronouns are he, they, and only you know about it. So I have to be very mindful that when it's just us, I'm supposed to use the pronouns he, they, but when they're around other people, I have to be very mindful that I don't refer to them by those pronouns. So make sure that you are very mindful and cautious about their boundaries, and you don't cross those boundaries ever.
Sure.
That's very important.
Awesome. So my second question was going to be about what not to say, but you beautifully answered that. So thank
Okay,
you.
great.
But again, I'm going to circle back to what you said
Yes.
right now is the pronouns part. Like I see on a lot of Instagram bios that she slash her,
Yes.
he slash him, or he slash they,
Right,
or they
right.
slash them.
Right.
So can you elaborate about what are these pronouns, and when you actually are interacting with them in the sessions, okay, do you often use those pronouns to address them?
Yes. So this is something that I kind of struggled with at first because I was
Okay.
just starting out as a mental health professional, and these are some things that take time because ever since you were a kid, you've been taught that language is to be used in a certain
Sure.
way. But now that as we've grown older, we've used terms like selfie. And we don't care.
Correct.
But okay, if we want to use a term like they, you are like, अरे नहीं ये क्या ये pronoun के जैसे कैसे use कर सकते? Like we are very rigid in our ideas.
Correct.
So yes, I have to use those pronouns in my sessions, and I'm very mindful that I don't miss someone's pronouns and I misgender them because that it's such a little thing, but it matters so much to someone who's going through it, right? So that, and these pronouns are basically trying to eradicate the idea that if someone looks a certain way, then they're a certain gender. Like I shouldn't sit here and assume that just because you're presenting in a feminine manner that you identify as a woman.
Okay.
So which is why these pronouns come into play, where you may look a certain way but you may identify differently, so which is where the pronouns come into play. And they and them are pronouns that are used by people who do not feel like they're either male or female.
Okay.
They fit somewhere in the middle. They don't see themselves as entirely feminine or entirely masculine.
Understood.
That's non-binary, and that's when they use the pronouns they and them.
So I'm going to ask you a question about a bit of entertainment part. India is largely inspired by, or largely, I would again use the word inspired. Okay, let's stick with that for lack of a better word. That it revolves a lot around entertainment and cricket.
Right.
So do you think these Bollywood movies or OTT shows, the way they portray, a character from LGBTQIA community, they do any justice to them?
Not until very recently. Like up until say the early 2010s, a lot of the portrayal of the LGBT community used to be extremely caricaturish. They were only present in the film to be used as punchlines.
Or props.
Yeah, or props, right? Or to make them seem like the villain who wants to snatch the hero from the heroine, which is just so ridiculous, right?
Right.
So that's the portrayal up until like say the very early 2010s. However, slowly things are changing. I'm not saying that we've completely evolved as a society, but we're getting there. Like with films like Badhai Do, it was so refreshing to see two characters who were homosexuals but portrayed in such neutral light.
Correct.
Where the man was a police officer and the woman was a teacher.
Correct.
They were shown in such neutral light. They weren't shown as some revolutionaries who were trying to change the world, and they were not shown as just characters who were there for the punchlines. They were not just there for the
They were
joke.
the main characters.
They were the main
Yes.
characters, and the story revolved around their experiences in life in general and not just around their sexuality. So that is really refreshing to see. But it's only very recently started happening, but we have a very long way to go until we get to a place where we feel like cinema's evolved to an extent where people are going and watching a gay love story.
Correct.
I don't know if we are there yet,
Yet.
but I hope that we can get there someday.
Yeah, fingers crossed. All right. So, speaking about the entire evolution part of the LGBTQ community, do you think in the mental health awareness term, as a mental health professional, have we come a lot ahead, in opening up and understanding and accepting when it comes to somebody opening up to us, somebody telling us? So, in the mental health perspective, or from your point of view, do you think we've come a long way in that?
I think we have come a very, very, very long way, and I want to say kudos to anyone who's a part of the mental health profession, because I see people taking their Sundays, their days off, and going for workshops where they can learn queer affirmative therapy, right? And we're doing that only so that we can create safe space for people who are in the community.
Sure.
And we can provide them therapy in a very holistic manner, where we are not coming from a very rigid point of view. Oh no, because I'm a heterosexual, I see things in a certain way. Not that way. So, recently I had a client who's in his mid-40s who just came to terms with the idea that he may not be heterosexual. in his mid 40s.
Okay.
And he was recounting his experience from back when he was 18 or 19, and he had gone to a therapist back then, which was the biggest taboo, right? To go to a therapist,
Wow.
you're crazy.
Yeah.
Right? But he still ended up going, and the therapist told him, ये सब कुछ नहीं होता है, सब अमेरिकन आइडियाज होता है, तुम शादी कर लो, सब ठीक हो जाएगा.
Oh my god, that's such a traditional Indian parent way to say.
Exactly, and for that to come from a therapist, it was heartbreaking. It was very unfortunate because he did end up getting married. He ended up having a very unhappy marriage for the longest time. But now that he's finally coming to terms with it, he has taken the first step to let his wife know and get a divorce and
Wow.
move on from that. So we are definitely seeing a big change in terms of mental health, because most of the therapists that I know are queer affirmative, which means that we have the necessary skills to provide a safe space, a non-judgmental space to someone who may be a little bit different from who we are. So yeah,
Correct.
mental health has definitely come a very long way.
Great.
And I'm very proud.
I know you touched upon this topic, but again, I'm going to, maybe ask you this, that you spoke about safe space right now.
Right.
So if somebody comes and opens up to me, a friend, and comes and tells me that, you know what, hey, I think I may like, somebody of my same sex. How do I make sure that they are feeling safe with me? How do I create a safe space for them?
Okay, so first is by respecting their boundaries. Say if you had a female friend coming up to you and saying, hey, you know what, I think I might have crush on another girl. A lot of times, jokingly, we tend to say, अरे मैं ही तो नहीं हूँ ना वो. You don't have a crush on me, right? मेरे पे line मत मारना, right? And it's so ridiculous, because that's someone who's coming up with a lot of bravery to tell you about something
Correct.
that's going on in their life. So try not to make fun of it. Second thing is to respect their boundaries. Don't get too invasive about, like what do you think about them, what kind of fantasies do you have, and this and that. Don't ask any such questions. Try to be neutral about it. How would you respond to me if I told you that I had a crush on a guy?
Normally.
That's exactly how you're supposed to respond
Yeah.
to someone. Yeah, so just try to be as neutral as possible. Don't try to overcompensate by saying, oh, I'm so happy for you, I'm so proud of you, because again, that comes off as very fake, and it can kind of make people, it can be very off-putting to some people. So be as neutral about it as possible, and let them know that whatever they ultimately decide, they are still your friend, and you are still going to accept them no matter what.
Got it. I understand. So now, as we're coming to an end to this interview, I would like to again divide the question into two parts. Where do you have any message for two sets of our audiences? One who is like a part of group who's coming to terms with themselves, whether they are identifying themselves as a particular gender or as a particular term from the community, and to the Indian society who is still considering the entire concept of pride and LGBTQIA community as a taboo.
Yeah. So for anyone who's questioning their identity, please let this serve as a reminder that you're not alone, that even if things seem really, really scary right now, there's a whole group of people out there for you who love you and accept you even if they don't know you. That includes me. We are here to support you, and if you're questioning yourself, please take your time with it. The idea of figuring out your sexual identity is so vast, because for some people they may just know. Like you may just know at the age of 7 that, hey, maybe I'm into the same sex, right? So it's so simple for some people. For some people it may take years, yet for some others it may take an entire lifetime to come to terms with who they are, right? But whoever you are and wherever you are, just a reminder that you're not alone and that help is out there for you. So yeah, that. And for the society, I want to actually, this is more of a message to people who are allies, not necessarily part of the community. Sit your parents down and talk to them about these issues, right? Tell them that this is something that is the reality of our world, and this is something that slowly you can start coming to terms with. Now, we got really lucky to be born in the social media generation, so that we've got a lot of information at our fingertips, which is why we have so much information and so much knowledge about what's right from what's wrong. But our parents didn't have that. So give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe I can change their mind, maybe I can, if they just understood, if they just empathized, they may be able to understand. So my message is to accept that love does not come in just one form, and
love is love.
Love is love, and that even if you don't understand something, respect it. You don't have to fully understand something to respect it. So that would be my ultimate message.
Wow, great. Also, while you were speaking this, and I knew that I said we are coming to an end,
Yeah.
but suddenly I just had a question that popped up in my mind. I'm going to ask you from a not a very different, but from a reverse angle point of view, where what if a parent, a new generation parent, want to explain to their kid that why two people of the same gender are together and it is okay. So what are the slow steps, yet affirmative steps that you should take for the kid to understand that okay, this is pretty much normal?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I think that all schools and maybe colleges should start having these sort of workshops where we are just updating the kids that hey, the idea of a traditional family is changing, so let's get on board.
Sure.
One thing is to start by telling your kids stories and keeping the characters very neutral. Like I said about the movies also, try to keep the
Correct.
characters very neutral. Maybe there are so many wonderfully queer affirmative stories that are written by queer people themselves, and where they have stories about the same sex parents. There are also a lot of resources available on YouTube where you go on videos, and they've really simplified the idea of what gay is, what lesbian is, without making it too sexual.
Correct.
So that could be one way. Another way is to just make sure that the kid doesn't make assumptions about someone's family, what someone's family looks like. So use gender neutral terms like parents or folks instead of saying mom and dad. So that could be one way where you're making the society a little bit more inclusive for everybody. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ushma, for having us over here. I hope you had a great time watching this interview. Do share it with anybody who needs to watch this, and to all of you from the community, happy Pride!
Hi, so I had a great time interacting with Shweta here at Radio City India talking about Pride Month. For more such content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Bye. Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.
Radio